This is Judy DiLorenzo from A Life Well Planted, and today I'm demonstrating how I make tomato puree using Roma tomatoes from the garden, and then I'll show you how I process the puree into flat packages that are stackable for the freezer. We try to end up with enough tomato puree in the freezer to last us all year, and then I use it to make pasta sauce, pizza sauce, tomato soup, stews, etc. Anyway, I'm going to take some video along the way so I can show you this process. It is much easier than canning. I've canned plenty of jars of tomatoes in the past, but because I do have room in the freezer, I prefer this method because it is much faster and easier. You basically just wash the tomatoes, remove the stems, you core them, quarter them, process them in a high-speed blender until the skins and seeds are really pulverized into the sauce so you don't even notice them. And then you have to boil off the excess liquid. You basically cook it down till it's about half. You reduce it by about half, and then it's the right consistency, similar to what you would get when you open up a can of puree from the grocery store. And then after you get to that point, you have to cool down the puree, and then you bag it. I have a FoodSaver, I'm hoping you do too, because it's the easiest way then to bag the tomato puree. You suck out the air, you seal it, and you strive for nice flat packages so that it's stackable and easy to store in the freezer. Before we get started, I just want you to know you also have the option of freezing the puree in glass mason jars. So if you don't have a FoodSaver, or if you don't like using plastic even when it's BPA free, then you can freeze the puree either in 1.5 pints or pint-sized jars. Etched right into the glass are the words, "For freezing, fill here." That's your fill line. Don't go beyond it, or what could happen is when the liquid freezes and heaves upwards, it could build up pressure and the glass could crack. The quart-sized jars, whether it be the wide mouth or regular mouth, are not rated for freezing, and it says so right on the box. I overlooked that for many years, and I did used to freeze in the quart-sized jars, but I found that every 10 to 20 jars would crack, and once I realized they weren't rated for freezing, I stopped doing that. It's just not worth it, because then you have to throw the product away. Okay, so here we have tomatoes that I've washed. I've removed the stems. The next step is to core carefully, and then either cut into quarters, or in the case of larger tomatoes, you may want to cut into sixths. I would cut this baby into sixths. Then once you have enough, you put them in the blender. You let it go even until it's hot and steamy. That way you know that it's been blending long enough to pulverize those skins and seeds. And don't listen to people that say that you absolutely have to remove the skins. Yes, you do when you're canning, but not when you're freezing. It will not ruin the flavor, and trust me, you will not be able to detect them as long as you blend it long enough. I'm sure you really can't see from your vantage point, but there's absolutely no trace of skin or seeds. Also, you retain nutrients when you leave the skins on the tomatoes. Okay, so yesterday when I went to package the puree, I realized that the seal on my FoodSaver needs to be replaced. It's an inexpensive part that I can order online, but I couldn't wait. I'm going to order the seal, and when it comes in, we'll fix it and we'll gift this to one of our kids. But in the meantime, I did go out and I did buy a new FoodSaver. This was the base model years ago, and I paid $49 for it. The current base model is about $89. They didn't have it when I went shopping yesterday, so I ended up with the step up. It was $124, and it has a couple of additional features that I don't think are really worth it, but I had no choice. It has a setting for wet dry, and it has a trough to store your roll, and also it has a built-in cutter right here. This built-in cutter will cut the plastic for you. I'm pretty good with a pair of scissors, so I don't think it's really that important. But there you have it, my new FoodSaver. It came with the two-sized rolls of plastic. I go through more of the longer plastic roll because my projects usually are larger. And it also came with samples of the 2-sized pre-made bags. I never buy the pre-made bags. I'm happy they gifted me a couple, but they're more expensive than buying the rolls, and I like the option of cutting the bags to fit my project. That's it. There you have it. There's my FoodSaver story. Next up, I'll show you how I use it to package puree. I start by pre-measuring my puree. I prefer to package quarts, so that's why I use this quart-sized canning jar to just measure it out. You could use a pint-sized jar if you want to put up a smaller product or whatever. Oh, and isn't this cool? I just want to mention, this is a Maslin pan. It's also called a jam pot. I use it when I make jam, but also it's helpful for boiling off the excess liquid when making puree because the wide rim and the heavy, narrow base allows the puree to evaporate without scorching. Same goes for when you're making jam. Anyway, so I'm going to attempt to do this from the side. It'll be a little tricky, especially because it is a new FoodSaver that I have to get used to, but bear with me. These bags are scored. I find that 3.5 or 4 scores makes a good sized bag so that they end up, laying flat. The bigger the bag, the flatter the liquid will lie, obviously. So let's see, 1, 2.5, 3.5. I'm going to use this built-in cutter. There we have it. So now I have a bag that's open on both ends. So the first thing you do, you probably already know how to use your FoodSaver, I'm assuming, but in case you don't, the first thing you do is you seal the open end, and then once that's done, there we go. It's taking a while. Okay, so now that part's done. So now you have a bag, all right? I take my jar and I simply cover the jar with the bag, hold it tight, flip it over. Voila, now I have a quart of puree ready to seal. So I first get, the obvious big air bubbles out. There we go. You're going to put the edge, just like you would normally do, inside the trough. Feels a little different than my old machine. Okay, I'm going to make sure that it's set for moist. That's what it is. It isn't dry and wet, it's dry and moist are the settings. And then you seal. Hold it flat. When the air is pulled out, it automatically seals the other end. And that's it. And then of course you always want to label your product. I just put the date because I know what it is and I know the amount because the only tomato product I freeze is puree, always in quart bags. So I just put the date. And there you have it. Nice and flat, stackable. You do have to wipe out the excess liquid that collects on the edge. And if you keep the bag nice and dry, then you can just stack them right in the freezer and they won't stick together. So that's it. It's pretty simple, really. It's a useful tool. I don't get paid to promote the FoodSaver. There's probably other brands that would work just as well. I just find that it's easier to suck the air out and seal the bags this way versus using individual Ziploc baggies, which is another way that you could do it. You could try to get the air out and Ziploc the baggie, maybe get bags that have the double seal if you're going to use it for this purpose. See if you can find BPA-free bags if you're going to do that. But I think it's a little trickier to get the air out and end up with a flat package when you use a Ziploc versus just using a vacuum sealer machine like this. Here we have several packages of frozen puree that I pulled out just to show you what it looks like. These are packages that I just did a moment ago. So now you know how to make tomato puree and freeze it. The next time you have an abundance of Roma tomatoes, I hope you give it a try. Leave a comment or question below. There is more information on my food blog, alifewellplanted.com, regarding growing the garden and preserving the bounty. And as always, please remember, if you're not eating for health, you're eating for disease. So try to make every mouthful count.